Hello and welcome to another AD Quickbite, and in this video I'm going to talk you through some of my top spodding tips. Now, spodding plays a huge part in a lot of my fishing, from tench fishing, bream fishing and of course carp fishing, and over the years I've picked up on a few tips that can make spodding a lot easier. So the first thing I want to mention is braid choice, and for me I use a 20-pound breaking strain, quite low diameter braid, and the reason I use that is because it'll cast a lot further, a lot easier, and that's a dedicated floating spod braid. And the second tip on that is don't overfill your spool. You want to fill it up so it's about a mil or two below the lip of the spool. If you fill it right up to the top, the braid's going to fly off the spool far too quick and you're going to get wind knots. So the next point to mention is another really important point, and that's because you've only got 20-pound braid on your reel. If you don't put a shock leader on, you're likely to crack off. So for me, I tend to use a slightly lower diameter shock leader. Now, it will be 30 to 40-pound breaking strain, but that thinner diameter will mean I can get a smaller shock leader knot, which won't frap up in the eyes when I'm casting out. And the other thing to mention is the length of the shock leader. Once you've got, say, a drop of about halfway down your rod ready to cast, you want 3 to 4 turns of it on the spool of your reel. The next point to mention, you've now got your braid on your reel, you've got your shock leader tied on, and you're ready to start spodding. But before you make that first cast, another important tip is to splash plenty of water over the spool of the reel. The braid, if it's wet, again, will reduce the chances of wind knots. So now your braid is nice and wet and ready to make that first cast. But before you do that, the next tip is to make sure you wear a finger stall. Because the braid is quite a low diameter, if you don't have a finger stall on, it's likely to cut into your finger. And the second tip, which will help reduce that even more, is to make sure that the drag on your reel is done up really tight to avoid the spool from slipping round and again, potentially damaging your finger. So now it's time to start putting some bait in the swim, and one of the biggest mistakes I see people make is they fill their spom right up to the brim. Now this causes two things to happen. It will quite often mean that the spom opens in mid-air when you're trying to cast it, and it doesn't fly particularly straight. It'll start to wobble during the flight. So if you only 3/4 fill that spom, it will make sure that the spom actually opens when it hits the water rather than above your head, and it will fly a lot straighter and a lot truer. Well, there we go. There's some of my top tips to avoid those spodding disasters that we've all suffered from, such as wind knots and crack-offs. If you want to know a little bit more about spodding accurately and fishing accurately, Chris has filmed a video in the Learn to Fish category, and I'll put a link for that video below.